The origin of the first-generation BMW M3 is a fascinating tale that involves a fierce rivalry, tuning four-cylinder engines to their absolute maximum power output, abandoning Formula One and going all in by putting the whole fate of BMW in one man's hands. No one, least of all BMW, could have predicted the impact the E30 M3 would have. It is perhaps the most significant vehicle to ever roll out of BMW's factory. A car whose legacy endures to this day as a symbol of driving purity and performance. A car that cemented BMW's identity as the performance-focused brand it is today. But what if I told you none of this was planned? That BMW as we know it today might not even exist, if not for the chance creation of the first-generation M3? To truly understand this unexpected turn of events, we have to go all the way back to a chilling spring day in 1984, when BMW woke up to a PR nightmare. I guess every once in a while the stars align perfectly for something special to happen. This must have been the case when BMW decided to sign off on the M3 project, even though the reasoning behind their decision was pretty straightforward. They got caught with their pants down. They didn't plan on building the M3. Their hand was forced. You see, in the early 1980s, another manufacturer practically living next door to BMW came out with a car that would shake the motorsport world to its core. Yes, you guessed it. The Mercedes 190e 2.316. This car was engineered to homologate Mercedes' entry into touring car racing, particularly in the DTM. And Mercedes introduced their new touring car by organizing an event on May 12, 1984, that became a legend in its own right. The Nürburgring Race of Champions, a 12-lap race that featured 20 of the world's top drivers, including 9 Formula One world champions. And as if that wasn't enough, a young and virtually unknown driver took first place, catapulting his name to motorsport stardom, Ayrton Senna. Needless to say, every car that entered this legendary race was a freshly built Mercedes 190e touring car. Not a good look for BMW. Even worse, they didn't have an answer. But to their credit, BMW didn't just roll over and play dead. Instead, they had to make sure that they would avoid any further embarrassment. Fortunately, they had just the right man within their ranks to deliver the answer they were looking for: Paul Rosche. In the 1980s, this man wasn't just another engineer who worked at BMW. Far from it. You could even argue that he was the absolute perfect choice for the job at hand. But no one could have predicted his ascent when he joined BMW in 1957 as a fresh engineering graduate with no experience building engines and no desire to work for BMW. He only took the job because his mother insisted, and petrolheads everywhere are thankful he did. Because what happened next was a meteoric rise in the ranks of motorsport's most famous and successful engineers. Rosche quickly proved himself, which led to a promotion to BMW's racing team. There, he worked on the M10 engine, a legendary inline-4 block, creating one of his masterpieces along the way. The BMW M1213 Turbo, a turbocharged version of the M10 engine specifically engineered for Formula One. This engine delivered an astonishing 1,400 horsepower at maximum boost, nearly 20 times its original 75 horsepower output. But the M1213 Turbo didn't just look good on paper, it also delivered results. Powering Nelson Piquet's Brabham F1 car, it became the first turbo engine ever to win an F1 championship in 1983. Rosche and his team didn't have much time to celebrate though, because soon after, their fate had been decided by someone else. BMW announced its exit from Formula One. Paul Rosche and his team were disbanded. But BMW's decision to exit Formula One opened another door for Paul Rosche. He transitioned to lead a new project, creating the E30 M3. Armed with a clear mission to beat Mercedes in Group A racing, BMW couldn't have made a better choice as the father of the M3. In other words, the table was set to create something special, but it would be anything but easy, because Paul Rauch had to overcome a set of rules and limitations that he never had to deal with before. Group A rules required BMW to produce at least 5,000 road-legal versions of their race car. Instead of starting from scratch, Rauch and his team chose the BMW E30 as their foundation. With this decision made, they faced two options. First, keep modifications to a minimum, save on engineering and production costs, and essentially just slap on some racing mods on a regular E30 and call it a day. But they also had a second option. Do not stress about keeping the car close to its current production version, and instead, with no regard for cost, focus on one priority and one priority only: beat the Mercedes 190e. For a man who once squeezed 1,400 horsepower from a 1.5-liter engine, the choice was obvious. Rauch and his team rebuilt the E30 from the ground up. First, they took the base M10 engine and completely re-engineered it, drawing heavily from Rauch's expertise in BMW's racing engines. The result was a high-revving 2.3-liter four-cylinder engine producing 195 horsepower, which would become the heart of the M3. Next, they focused on suspension and driving dynamics. Essentially, they replaced everything with track performance-focused components, optimized weight distribution, and increased chassis rigidity, resulting in razor-sharp handling on the track. However, there was still one aspect they weren't satisfied with: aerodynamics. To address this, they took a radical approach, tearing everything apart and starting from scratch. The changes included flared fenders, a more aggressive front splitter, a rear wing, and a reshaped rear window to improve airflow. By the time they finished, the E30 M3 shared almost no parts with its base model counterpart. This wasn't just a modified E30, it was a purpose-built race car with no concern for cost or effort. Why should they care about the cost of building this machine anyway? After all, only 5,000 units needed to be produced for the car to comply with Group A regulations, right? Wrong, because something happened that no one had anticipated. You see, car manufacturers sometimes design cars as so-called halo models. These cars aren't intended for large-scale production or mass-market sales. Instead, their primary purpose is to generate excitement around the brand, to grab the attention of potential customers and lure them into dealerships, where they can buy more practical mainstream cars designed with cost efficiency and profitability in mind. BMW expected the M3 to fit neatly into this category. As long as it hit the minimum production requirement of 5,000 units to comply with Group A regulations, they considered it a success. Here's the problem, though. Their plan completely backfired, not because Rauch and his team failed to deliver. Quite the opposite, they did their job too well. The M3 didn't just outperform Mercedes, it essentially outperformed every other car in its class and went on to become the most successful touring car of all time. It dominated competitions like DTM and the World Touring Car Championship, solidifying BMW's reputation as an unbeatable motorsport powerhouse in the 1980s and 1990s. So, what's the problem, you ask? Well, this success led to something BMW never anticipated. Sure, the E30 M3 attracted plenty of customers to dealerships, but they weren't interested in browsing BMW's other models. They all wanted M3s.